Sarah Martinez walked through the hallways of Lincoln High School with her head held high, even though whispers followed her everywhere she went. Her olive-green military surplus jacket hung loose on her small frame, and her worn combat boots made soft squeaking sounds against the polished linoleum floor. The other students stared at her with a mixture of confusion and barely contained laughter. "Look at Army Girl," Jessica Webb whispered loudly to her friends near the lockers. "Does she think she's some kind of soldier or something?" Sarah pretended not to hear, but her jaw tightened slightly as she continued walking toward her first period chemistry class. She had heard it all before. The comments about her clothes, her serious demeanor, the way she carried herself with military precision even though she was only 17 years old. "Maybe she's going to the costume party early," another voice called out, followed by a burst of giggles. The truth was, Sarah had good reasons for dressing the way she did, reasons that went far deeper than teenage rebellion or a desire to stand out. But she had learned long ago that explaining herself only made things worse. People saw what they wanted to see, and most of her classmates saw a girl playing dress-up in military clothing. Mr. Thompson, her chemistry teacher, nodded approvingly as Sarah took her usual seat in the front row. She was one of his best students, always prepared, always focused, never causing trouble. But even he sometimes wondered about her unusual choice in clothing. "Today we're going to discuss chemical compounds used in emergency situations," Mr. Thompson announced to the class. "Can anyone tell me what might be found in a standard military first aid kit?" Several hands shot up, but Sarah remained still, her dark eyes focused on her notebook. She could have listed every item in a combat medics kit, explained their uses, and demonstrated proper application techniques. But she had learned that showing too much knowledge about military topics only fueled more rumors and jokes. "Sarah?" Mr. Thompson called on her directly. "Any thoughts?" "Basic supplies," she answered quietly. "Bandages, antiseptic, pain medication." It was a careful, understated response that revealed nothing about the extensive medical training she had received or the certification she had earned through programs most of her classmates had never heard of. During lunch, Sarah sat alone at a table near the windows, eating a sandwich she had packed from home. The cafeteria buzzed with typical teenage conversations about weekend plans, upcoming dances, and who was dating whom. She listened to fragments of conversations while reading a book about emergency response protocols. "There she is again with her war books," Tyler Hansen said as he passed her table with his football teammates. "Hey, G.I. Jane, when are you shipping out to boot camp?" His friends laughed, and one of them made exaggerated marching motions. Sarah looked up from her book just long enough to meet Tyler's eyes with a steady gaze that made him slightly uncomfortable. There was something in her expression that didn't match her small stature or quiet demeanor, something that suggested depths he couldn't understand. "Leave her alone," said Marcus Chen, one of the few students who sometimes defended her. "She's not bothering anyone." "I'm just curious about our little soldier girl," Tyler replied, but he moved on when Sarah returned her attention to her book without responding. After school, Sarah walked to her part-time job at Murphy's hardware store. Mr. Murphy, a Vietnam veteran in his 70s, had hired her 6 months earlier and quickly discovered that she knew more about tools and equipment than most of his adult customers. "How was school today, kiddo?" he asked as she tied on her work apron. "Same as usual," Sarah replied, beginning to organize inventory on the shelves. Mr. Murphy studied her face and recognized the signs of someone dealing with social difficulties. He had seen similar expressions on young soldiers who didn't quite fit in with their units. "You know," he said carefully, "when I was overseas, we had this saying. The quietest person in the room is often the most dangerous one to underestimate." Sarah paused in her work and looked at him. "What do you mean?" "People make assumptions based on what they see on the surface," Mr. Murphy explained. "But sometimes the most capable people are the ones who don't need to advertise their abilities." That evening, Sarah returned to the small apartment she shared with her grandmother, Elena Martinez. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was 12, and Elena had raised her with a combination of love and military discipline that came from her own experience as an army nurse. "How was your day, Mija?" Elena asked in accented English as Sarah hung up her jacket. "The same," Sarah answered, settling down at the kitchen table to do homework. Elena watched her granddaughter with concern. She knew Sarah was struggling socially at school, but she also knew the girl possessed skills and knowledge that would serve her well in life, even if her classmates couldn't see it yet. "Remember what I taught you about patience," Elena said gently. "Sometimes people need time to understand who you really are." Sarah nodded, but privately wondered if her classmates would ever see beyond her unusual appearance and quiet manner. She had dreams and goals that extended far beyond high school, but she often felt isolated from her peers who seemed to live in a completely different world. The next day brought more of the same treatment. In English class, when Mrs. Patterson asked students to share their career aspirations, most talked about college majors, business careers, or artistic pursuits. When it was Sarah's turn, she simply said she was considering military service, which prompted the usual eye rolls and whispered comments about her playing soldier. What her classmates didn't know was that Sarah had already completed several civilian versions of military training programs. She held certifications in emergency medical response, had finished a youth leadership academy run by former military personnel, and had achieved expert-level marksmanship scores at a local shooting range where she trained with off-duty police officers. During PE class, the students were doing fitness testing, and Sarah's performance surprised even the most athletic students. She completed more push-ups than any other student, including the varsity football players. Her mile time was faster than the track team's best runners. But, instead of earning respect, her abilities only seemed to make her classmates more uncomfortable. "Show off," muttered Ashley Rodriguez as Sarah finished her sit-ups. "Maybe she's taking steroids," suggested another girl. Sarah ignored the comments and focused on her breathing as she cooled down from the exercises. She had learned these techniques from former military instructors who emphasized mental toughness along with physical conditioning. That weekend, Sarah participated in a regional emergency response training exercise held at the National Guard base outside of town. She was the youngest participant by several years, but her performance impressed the military personnel running the program. She demonstrated advanced medical skills, showed exceptional leadership ability during crisis scenarios, and maintained composure under pressure that would have rattled most adults. "Outstanding work, Martinez," said Sergeant First Class Johnson, a career military medic who had served multiple combat deployments. "You've got natural talent and excellent training. Have you given thought to military service after graduation?" "Yes, Sergeant," Sarah replied. "I'm hoping to qualify for advanced medical training programs." "With skills like yours, I think you'd have an excellent chance," Johnson said. "Keep up the good work." When Sarah returned to school on Monday, she felt energized by the positive feedback from the weekend training. But her mood quickly deflated when she encountered the usual treatment from her classmates. "Where were you this weekend, Army girl?" asked Jessica Webb with mock concern. "War games in your backyard?" Sarah's friend Marcus noticed her expression and tried to change the subject. "Did you finish the history assignment about World War II?" he asked. "Yes," Sarah replied quietly, grateful for his attempt to redirect the conversation. In history class, Mr. Davis was discussing military strategy during major battles, and several students made jokes about asking Sarah for expert commentary. She remained silent, even though she could have provided detailed analysis based on her studies of military tactics and strategy. The success of military operations often depends on factors that aren't immediately obvious, Mr. Davis explained. Training, preparation, and mental toughness can be more important than size or apparent strength. Sarah found herself paying close attention to his words, thinking about how they applied not just to military situations but to her daily life at school. She was surrounded by people who judged her based on superficial observations, never suspecting the depth of her knowledge and capabilities. After school, Sarah stopped by the local fire station where she volunteered with their community emergency response team. Chief Williams, a former Marine, had welcomed her into the program after seeing her certifications and witnessing her performance during training exercises. "We've got a CPR certification class tonight," Chief Williams told her. "Would you mind helping demonstrate the techniques?" "Of course, Chief," Sarah replied, pleased to be trusted with additional responsibility. During the class, Sarah worked with community members of all ages, patiently explaining proper chest compression techniques and rescue breathing procedures. An elderly man struggled with the physical demands of the exercise, and Sarah quickly adapted her teaching approach to help him succeed. "You're a natural instructor," observed Dr. Patricia Hayes, a local physician who volunteered with the program. "Have you considered emergency medicine as a career?" "It's definitely a possibility," Sarah said. "I'm interested in trauma medicine and emergency response." "Well, you certainly have the skills and temperament for it," Dr. Hayes replied. "Keep me in mind if you need recommendations for medical programs." That night, Sarah lay in bed thinking about the contrast between her school life and her activities outside of school. In the real world of emergency response and military training, adults recognized her abilities and treated her with respect. But, at school, she remained an outsider, dismissed and mocked by peers who couldn't see beyond her appearance. The next few weeks followed the same pattern. Sarah excelled in her classes while enduring constant social isolation and mockery. She continued her weekend training programs and volunteer work, building skills and earning recognition from adults who understood her potential. But, at school, nothing changed. One particularly difficult day, Tyler Hansen and his friends cornered her near the gym after school. "Hey, combat girl," Tyler called out. "Why don't you ever fight back when we make fun of you? I thought military people were supposed to be tough." Sarah stood perfectly still, her hands at her sides, and looked directly at Tyler. "I don't need to prove anything to you," she said calmly. "Oh, so you're too good to defend yourself?" Tyler stepped closer, trying to intimidate her. "I'm choosing not to," Sarah replied, her voice steady and controlled. Something in her tone made Tyler hesitate. There was no fear in her voice, no uncertainty. She spoke like someone who was completely confident in her ability to handle the situation but was choosing restraint over action. "Whatever, weirdo," Tyler muttered, backing away with his friends. Sarah walked home that afternoon wondering how much longer she could endure the constant harassment and isolation. She had less than 2 months left until graduation, but each day felt increasingly difficult to bear. That evening, Elena noticed her granddaughter's mood and sat down beside her on the couch. "Talk to me, Mija," she said gently. "I just don't understand why they have to be so cruel," Sarah admitted. "I'm not hurting anyone. I just want to finish school and move on with my life." "People fear what they don't understand," Elena said wisely. "Your classmates see strength in you that they don't possess, and it makes them uncomfortable. But your time will come, Mija. When it matters most, people will see who you really are." Sarah hoped her grandmother was right, but she couldn't imagine circumstances that would change her classmates' opinions of her. She was just the weird girl who wore military clothes and kept to herself, someone to be mocked and avoided. She had no way of knowing that events were already in motion that would soon reveal the truth about her capabilities to everyone at Lincoln High School, changing everything in ways she never could have anticipated. The emergency began on a Tuesday morning during third-period chemistry class. Sarah was taking notes on chemical reactions when the first tremor shook the building. At first, students looked around confused, thinking maybe a large truck had passed by outside. But, when the second tremor hit harder, rattling windows and causing beakers to slide across lab tables, everyone realized this was an earthquake. "Everyone get under your desks," Mr. Thompson shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the screaming and chaos that erupted in the classroom. While her classmates panicked, diving under tables and crying out in fear, Sarah immediately assessed the situation with the trained eye of someone who had studied emergency response protocols extensively. She noted the locations of potential hazards, identified the safest areas of the room, and began moving toward students who seemed most at risk. "Stay away from the windows," she called out firmly, grabbing Jessica Webb's arm and pulling her away from the large glass panels that were flexing dangerously with each tremor. Jessica was too terrified to protest or make her usual sarcastic comments. The earthquake lasted only 90 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. When the shaking finally stopped, the classroom was in chaos. Several students were crying, others sat in stunned silence, and a few had minor cuts from broken glass. Mr. Thompson was trying to maintain order, but he was clearly shaken himself. "Is everyone okay?" he asked, his voice unsteady. Sarah was already moving through the room, checking on her classmates with calm efficiency. She knelt beside David Park, who had hit his head when he fell during the quake and was now bleeding from a small cut on his forehead. "Let me see," she said gently, producing a small first aid kit from her backpack. Her classmates watched in amazement as she cleaned the wound with practiced movements and applied a proper bandage. "How do you know how to do that?" David asked, wincing slightly. "Basic first aid," Sarah replied simply, already moving to check on other students. Through the classroom windows, they could see that the situation outside was much worse than anyone had initially realized. Part of the school's main building had sustained significant damage, and smoke was rising from the direction of the science wing. In the distance, they could hear sirens, but it was clear that emergency responders would be overwhelmed by the scope of the disaster. Mr. Thompson tried to use his cell phone to contact the main office, but the call wouldn't go through. "The cell towers must be damaged," he said, worry evident in his voice. The landlines are probably down too, Sarah observed. Standard protocol would be to establish a safe meeting point and wait for emergency personnel to reach us. Her classmates stared at her. They had never heard her speak with such authority before, and there was something about her demeanor that commanded attention. "What do you think we should do?" Mr. Thompson asked, surprising everyone by directing the question to Sarah. Sarah looked around the damaged classroom, mentally calculating risks and options. "We need to evacuate this room safely and find the designated emergency assembly area. But first we should check for injuries and make sure everyone can walk." She began conducting a systematic check of each student, asking specific questions about pain, dizziness, and mobility. Her approach was so professional and thorough that even Tyler Hansen, who usually mocked her every move, submitted to her examination without complaint. "Sarah, where did you learn to do this?" asked Marcus, watching her work. "Training," she replied without elaborating, focused on checking Ashley Rodriguez's ankle, which had been twisted during the earthquake. "What kind of training?" Jessica pressed, her earlier hostility replaced by curiosity and growing respect. Before Sarah could answer, a new crisis emerged. Through the broken windows, they could see students from other buildings stumbling around the campus in confusion. Some were clearly injured, and there was no sign of adult supervision in many areas. "We need to help them," Sarah said, moving toward the door. "Wait," Mr. Thompson called out. "We should stay here until help arrives." Sarah paused and turned back to face him. "Sir, with respect, help might not arrive for hours. The emergency response system is probably overwhelmed, and people out there need immediate assistance." There was something in her tone that made everyone listen. This wasn't the quiet, withdrawn girl they were used to seeing. This was someone who spoke with knowledge and confidence about emergency situations. "What do you suggest?" Mr. Thompson asked. "We established this classroom as a temporary aid station," Sarah said, her mind already working through the logistics. "We have running water, flat surfaces for treating injuries, and we're far enough from the damaged areas to be relatively safe. I'll need volunteers to help me set up triage areas and gather supplies." Without waiting for permission, she began organizing the space with military efficiency. She moved desks to create clear pathways, designated areas for different types of injuries, and started inventorying supplies. "Jessica, I need you to help me move these chairs," she said calmly. "Tyler, can you and your friends check the supply closets for anything that might be useful? Towels, bottled water, anything clean that we can use for bandages." To everyone's amazement, her classmates began following her instructions without question. There was something about her calm competence that inspired confidence, even among students who had spent months mocking her. Within 20 minutes, Sarah had transformed their chemistry classroom into an organized medical station. She had created separate areas for minor injuries, more serious wounds, and students who were in shock or experiencing panic attacks. She had established a supply station and even set up a communication area where students could try to contact their families. The first injured students began arriving as word spread that someone in the chemistry building knew first aid. Sarah treated each case with the same calm professionalism, from minor cuts and bruises to more serious injuries that required careful attention. "Oh my God, Sarah," gasped Amy Chen, Marcus's sister, as she helped carry in a boy with a possible broken arm. "How do you know how to do all this?" Sarah was in the middle of fashioning a makeshift sling and didn't look up from her work. "I've had training," she said simply. "What kind of training?" Amy pressed. "This is like professional level stuff." But Sarah was already moving on to the next patient, a girl who was hyperventilating from panic. She knelt beside her and spoke in a soothing voice, using breathing techniques to help calm her down. "Follow my breathing," Sarah instructed. "In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. That's it, you're doing great." Mr. Thompson watched in amazement as Sarah worked. In all his years of teaching, he had never seen a student handle a crisis with such maturity and skill. She seemed to have training that rivaled professional emergency responders. As the afternoon progressed, more students and even some faculty members began arriving at Sarah's improvised medical station. Word had spread throughout the school that someone in the chemistry building was providing professional quality emergency care. Sarah called out Mrs. Patterson, the English teacher, as she helped support a limping student. "Thank goodness you're here. This is Michael from my class, and I think he might have injured his knee badly." Sarah immediately began examining the injury, asking precise questions about pain levels and range of motion. Her assessment was thorough and methodical, and she determined that while painful, the injury was likely a bad sprain rather than something requiring immediate surgical attention. "I'm going to immobilize it," she told Michael. "This might hurt a little, but it will help prevent further damage." As she worked, creating a professional quality knee brace from available materials, students gathered around watching in fascination. This was not the girl they thought they knew. This person displayed skills and knowledge that none of them possessed. "Sarah," Tyler Hansen said quietly, approaching her with uncharacteristic humility. "I owe you an apology. I've been a complete jerk to you, and I had no idea that you could do things like this." Sarah looked up from her work briefly. "We can talk about that later," she said without anger or bitterness. "Right now, let's focus on helping people." Her response only increased Tyler's respect for her. She wasn't holding grudges or demanding acknowledgement of past wrongs. She was simply focused on what needed to be done. By late afternoon, Sarah had treated more than 30 students and faculty members. Her improvised medical station was running smoothly, with her classmates now working as trained assistants under her direction. She had taught them basic first aid techniques, shown them how to recognize signs of serious injury, and even trained a few in simple crisis counseling techniques. "I still can't believe this," Jessica said as she helped Sarah organize supplies. "Where did you learn all this stuff?" "Various places," Sarah replied, checking her watch. "Emergency medical training, disaster response courses, leadership programs." "But when?" asked Marcus. "We've been in school together for 4 years, and I've never seen you do anything like this." Sarah paused in her work and looked around at her classmates. For the first time in years, they were looking at her with respect and genuine interest instead of mockery and dismissal. "I've been training every weekend for the past 3 years," she admitted. "Emergency response, medical certification, leadership development. I volunteer with the fire department and participate in National Guard youth programs." The silence that followed was profound. Her classmates were beginning to understand that they had completely misjudged the quiet girl who wore military surplus clothing. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" asked Ashley, who was helping to comfort students suffering from shock. "Would you have believed me?" Sarah asked gently. "Or would you have just made more jokes about me playing soldier?" The truth of her words hung in the air. Her classmates realized that their own behavior had created the very isolation they were now questioning. As evening approached, the first professional emergency responders finally reached their section of the school. A team of paramedics and firefighters entered the chemistry building expecting to find chaos and panic. Instead, they discovered a well-organized medical station running with military precision. "Who's in charge here?" asked Captain Rodriguez, the lead paramedic. "That would be Sarah," Mr. Thompson said, pointing to where she was briefing a group of student volunteers. Captain Rodriguez approached Sarah with skepticism. She looked like a teenager in military surplus clothing, not someone who could organize an effective emergency response operation. "I'm Captain Rodriguez with County EMS," he said. "I understand you've been providing medical care?" "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, immediately producing a handwritten log of every patient she had treated, complete with detailed notes about injuries, treatments provided, and current status. Captain Rodriguez's expression changed as he reviewed her documentation. This was professional quality record keeping that met or exceeded standard emergency response protocols. "Where did you get your training?" he asked with growing respect. "Multiple certifications through civilian emergency response programs," Sarah replied. "EMR certification, disaster response training, crisis leadership development." "EMR?" Captain Rodriguez repeated, surprised. "Emergency medical responder? That's serious training." "Yes, sir. I'm also certified in CPR, advanced first aid, trauma response, and crisis counseling." Captain Rodriguez looked around the organized medical station, reviewed Sarah's patient logs, and observed the calm efficiency with which her student volunteers were operating. "This is outstanding work," he said finally. "You've done everything exactly right. Professional quality triage, proper documentation, excellent resource management. I'm going to recommend you for commendation." Sarah's classmates overheard this conversation, and many began to truly understand for the first time that they had spent years dismissing someone with remarkable abilities and training. The earthquake had revealed a side of Sarah that none of them had suspected, but this was only the beginning of the revelations that would completely change how Lincoln High School viewed the quiet girl in military clothing. The day after the earthquake, Lincoln High School was closed for structural assessments and cleanup. But the story of what had happened in the chemistry building spread rapidly through social media and local news reports. Sarah Martinez had become the subject of conversations throughout the community, though she remained largely unaware of her growing reputation. At home, Sarah was helping her grandmother Elena clean up damage from the earthquake when her phone began buzzing with messages from classmates. She had never received so much attention from her peers, and most of the messages expressed amazement and gratitude for her actions during the emergency. "I can't believe how wrong we were about you," read a text from Jessica Webb. "Thank you for saving us yesterday. I'm sorry for how we treated you." Similar messages came from Tyler Hansen, Ashley Rodriguez, and dozens of other students. Even teachers were reaching out to express their admiration for her performance during the crisis. "Mija, you should be proud," Elena said as she watched Sarah read through the messages. "You showed them who you really are." "I was just doing what needed to be done," Sarah replied, though she was clearly moved by the positive responses. Elena smiled knowingly. "That's exactly why you're special. You don't do these things for recognition. You do them because they're right." When school reopened 3 days later, Sarah immediately noticed the difference in how her classmates treated her. Students who had previously ignored or mocked her now nodded respectfully when they passed her in the hallways. Some even stopped to thank her personally for her help during the earthquake. "Hey Sarah," called out Marcus Chen as she approached her locker. "My parents wanted me to invite you to dinner this weekend. They heard about what you did for Amy and the other kids, and they want to thank you properly." Sarah was touched by the invitation but felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention. "That's very kind of them, but they don't need to thank me." "Yes, they do," Marcus insisted. "And so do we. We all owe you big time." In chemistry class, Mr. Thompson asked Sarah to stay after the bell. When the other students had left, he turned to her with an expression of deep respect. "Sarah, I've been teaching for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like what you did during the earthquake," he said. "Your response was absolutely professional. Where exactly did you receive your training?" Sarah had been getting this question frequently since the earthquake, and she was beginning to realize that she couldn't avoid the topic any longer. Her classmates and teachers deserved to understand the background that had prepared her for the emergency. "I've been participating in civilian emergency response programs for 3 years, she explained. "I'm certified as an emergency medical responder through the National Registry. I also completed wilderness first aid training, disaster response certification, and tactical emergency casualty care." Mr. Thompson's eyes widened. "Tactical emergency casualty care? That's military-level training." "Yes, sir. I've been attending National Guard youth leadership programs and training exercises. I'm hoping to enlist after graduation and pursue advanced medical training in the military." "Sarah, this explains so much about you," Mr. Thompson said. "Your discipline, your focus, your knowledge. You've been preparing for a career in emergency services all this time." That afternoon, Sarah was called to the principal's office. Principal Morrison was waiting with a woman in a professional suit who introduced herself as Rebecca Walsh from the County Emergency Management Office. "Ms. Martinez," Principal Morrison began, "Ms. Walsh is here because word of your actions during the earthquake has reached the county level. She has some very interesting things to tell you." Ms. Walsh leaned forward with obvious enthusiasm. "Sarah, your response to the earthquake emergency has been reviewed by our professional emergency management team. Your documentation, your triage decisions, your resource management, and your leadership were all exemplary. We'd like to offer you a position in our youth emergency response program." Sarah was surprised by the offer. What would that involve? Training with professional emergency responders, participating in real disaster response operations, and eventually becoming a certified emergency management specialist, Ms. Walsh explained. "It's an accelerated program that could lead to full-time employment with county emergency services after graduation. The county wants to hire you," Principal Morrison added with pride. "This is an incredible opportunity." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the sudden recognition and opportunities. 3 days ago, she had been an outcast mocked by her classmates. Now she was being recruited by professional emergency services. Over the following week, Sarah's life changed dramatically. Local news stations ran stories about the teenage emergency responder who had saved dozens of students during the earthquake. The stories revealed details about her extensive training and certifications that amazed viewers. Tonight at 6, we'll meet Sarah Martinez, the Lincoln High School student whose emergency medical training turned her into a hero during Tuesday's earthquake, announced Channel 7's evening news anchor. The news coverage led to even more recognition. Sarah received letters from military recruiters, emergency services departments, and medical training programs. But the attention that meant the most to her came from her classmates, who were finally seeing her for who she really was. Tyler Hansen approached her at lunch with several of his football teammates. "Sarah, I need to say something to you," he began nervously. "We've been complete jerks to you for years, and I'm really sorry. We had no idea what kind of person you really are." "Thank you for saying that," Sarah replied graciously. "But let's just focus on moving forward." "That's the thing," Tyler continued. "You have every right to be angry with us, but you're not. Even during the earthquake, when we needed help, you didn't hesitate to take care of everyone. That says a lot about your character." Similar conversations were happening throughout the school. Students who had mocked Sarah's military-style clothing now understood that her appearance reflected serious preparation and training. Teachers who had wondered about her quiet intensity now realized she had been developing professional-level skills while her classmates were focused on typical teenage concerns. But the most significant change came when Sarah was invited to address the entire student body at a special assembly. Principal Morrison introduced her as a student who exemplifies the best qualities of preparedness, service, and leadership. Standing at the podium in front of the entire school, Sarah felt nervous for the first time since the earthquake. She had handled emergency medical situations with calm confidence, but speaking to hundreds of her peers about her experiences felt more challenging. 3 years ago, I decided I wanted to serve others in emergency situations, she began, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. I knew that required serious training and commitment, so I started participating in civilian emergency response programs every weekend. She described her certifications, her volunteer work with the fire department, and her participation in National Guard youth programs. As she spoke, students listened with growing amazement to learn about the depth of her preparation and training. I wore military-style clothing because it was practical for my training activities, she explained. But I realized that my appearance made some people uncomfortable, and I understand why my behavior might have seemed strange to classmates who didn't know about my outside activities. When she finished speaking, the auditorium erupted in applause. Students who had mocked her for years were now giving her a standing ovation, finally, understanding that they had completely misjudged someone extraordinary. After the assembly, Sarah found herself surrounded by students asking questions about her training and expressing interest in emergency response careers. Some wanted to know how they could get involved in similar programs. Others simply wanted to apologize for their past treatment of her. "I can't believe we wasted so much time making fun of you," said Amy Chen. "You were doing something incredible, and we were too stupid to see it." "It's okay," Sarah replied. "Most people don't understand emergency response work unless they've been exposed to it." That weekend, Sarah attended her regular training session at the National Guard base, but this time several of her classmates asked if they could come along to observe. She arranged for them to visit during a public demonstration, and they were amazed to see her working alongside military personnel and professional emergency responders. "She's like a completely different person here," Jessica observed to Marcus as they watched Sarah demonstrate advanced medical techniques to a group of adult trainees. "She's confident, authoritative, completely in control." "I don't think she's different," Marcus replied thoughtfully. "I think this is who she's always been. We just never bothered to look beneath the surface." Sergeant First Class Johnson, who had worked with Sarah for over a year, noticed the group of teenagers watching from the observation area. "Friends of yours, Martinez?" he asked. "Classmates," Sarah replied. "They wanted to see what our training exercises are like." "Well, they're getting a good show," Johnson said with approval. "Your casualty assessment was textbook perfect, and your treatment decisions were spot on. You're ready for the advanced tactical medicine course." Sarah's classmates overheard this conversation and realized they were witnessing something remarkable. Military professionals were treating their teenage classmate as an equal, praising her skills and offering advanced training opportunities. The following Monday at school, word spread quickly about what students had witnessed at the National Guard base. The girl they had dismissed as weird was actually training with military personnel and earning their respect through demonstrated competence. "I still can't wrap my head around this," Tyler admitted to his friends at lunch. "Sarah's been doing military-level medical training while we've been worried about football games and parties. Makes me feel pretty shallow," agreed one of his teammates. "She's been preparing for a real career while we've been focused on high school drama." Sarah noticed the conversations happening around her but tried to maintain her normal routine. She appreciated the newfound respect from her classmates, but she was also aware that this attention wouldn't last forever. After graduation, she would be moving on to military service and advanced medical training, finally, able to fully pursue her calling without the social complications of high school. However, she had no way of knowing that an event was approaching that would demonstrate her capabilities on an even larger stage, in front of not just her school but the entire community. The earthquake had revealed her medical and leadership skills to her classmates, but something even more dramatic was about to show everyone exactly how far her training had progressed. During her next weekend training session, Sergeant Johnson pulled her aside for a private conversation. "Martinez, there's something special coming up that I think you should know about," he said with a serious expression. "We're planning a demonstration for civilian emergency response teams, and we've been asked to showcase our youth development program." "What kind of demonstration, Sergeant?" Sarah asked. "Full-scale emergency response simulation," Johnson explained. "Multiple casualties, complex scenarios, coordination between military and civilian responders. And we want you to be one of the primary team leaders." Sarah felt a surge of excitement mixed with nervousness. This would be her chance to demonstrate everything she had learned, working alongside professional military and civilian emergency responders in a realistic crisis scenario. "When and where will this take place?" she asked. Johnson smiled, knowing this information would surprise her. "Next Friday afternoon, at Lincoln High School. We're using your school's facilities for the exercise, and we'll have observers from throughout the county." Sarah realized that her classmates, teachers, and community members would witness her performing at the highest level of her training. After years of hiding her capabilities, she would finally have the opportunity to show everyone exactly who she had become through dedication and hard work. The demonstration would prove to be unlike anything Lincoln High School had ever experienced, and it would forever change how people viewed the quiet girl who had always worn military clothing with such quiet pride. Friday morning arrived with unusual excitement at Lincoln High School. Word had spread that some kind of emergency response demonstration would be taking place on the football field during lunch period, but most students had no idea what to expect. The administration had announced that classes would be dismissed early so students could observe a special presentation by county emergency services and National Guard personnel. Sarah felt nervous energy coursing through her as she sat in first period English class, trying to concentrate on Mrs. Patterson's discussion of character development in literature. The irony wasn't lost on her that they were analyzing how authors reveal hidden depths in fictional characters just hours before she would reveal her own hidden capabilities to the entire school. "Sarah, you seem distracted today," Mrs. Patterson observed. "Is everything all right?" "Yes, ma'am," Sarah replied. "Just thinking about this afternoon." She hadn't told her classmates about her role in the upcoming demonstration. Sergeant Johnson had briefed her extensively on the scenario they would be performing, but she had been instructed to keep the details confidential until the exercise began. By fourth period, students were buzzing with curiosity about the afternoon event. Rumors circulated about everything from military recruiting presentations to disaster preparedness drills. Some students speculated that it might be related to the recent earthquake response, but no one suspected the true scope of what they were about to witness. "I heard they're bringing in helicopters," Marcus told Sarah as they walked to lunch. "My dad works for the county, and he said it's going to be a major demonstration with multiple agencies involved." Sarah nodded but didn't elaborate. She knew that the demonstration would indeed involve aircraft, but the helicopters would be part of a realistic medical evacuation scenario that would showcase advanced trauma care and emergency response coordination. During lunch period, students began gathering on the bleachers overlooking the football field. Faculty members joined them, and Sarah noticed that many parents and community members were also arriving. Principal Morrison had clearly promoted this as a significant community event. "Ladies and gentlemen," Principal Morrison announced over the PA system, "please take your seats in the bleachers for today's emergency response demonstration. We're honored to have County Emergency Services and National Guard personnel presenting a realistic training scenario." Sarah excused herself and walked toward the field house, where she knew the participating responders were staging their equipment. Her stomach was filled with butterflies, but she also felt the calm confidence that came from extensive training and preparation. In the field house, she found Sergeant Johnson conducting a final briefing with the demonstration team. Sarah was surprised to see how many personnel were involved: paramedics from 3 different counties, firefighters from multiple departments, police officers, and several National Guard medics and flight crews. "All right, people," Sergeant Johnson announced. "This is a full-scale mass casualty exercise with multiple scenarios running simultaneously. We have observers from throughout the region, so let's make this professional and educational." He turned to Sarah, who was putting on her emergency response vest and checking her medical kit. "Martinez, your team leader for the trauma station. You'll have 2 professional medics working under your supervision, and you'll be handling the most complex casualty scenarios." Sarah felt a surge of pride and responsibility. Being designated as team leader meant that the military personnel trusted her skills completely, even when working alongside professional emergency responders with years of experience. "Understood, Sergeant," she replied. "I'm ready." Outside on the football field, the setup was impressive. Multiple staging areas had been established to simulate different emergency scenarios: building collapse victims, vehicle accident casualties, hazardous material exposure, and mass casualty triage. Professional actors had been recruited to portray injured civilians, and their makeup was realistic enough to look genuinely traumatic. The demonstration began with a simulated building collapse. Actors portraying trapped and injured civilians were positioned throughout a temporary structure that had been built on the 50-yard line. The scenario called for coordinated response from multiple agencies, with complex medical decision-making and resource allocation challenges. "Oh my God," Jessica whispered from the bleachers as she watched the realistic simulation begin. "This looks like a real disaster." From the students section, Sarah's classmates could see emergency responders rushing toward the simulated collapse site, but they couldn't yet identify individual team members through the chaos and distance. Sarah moved quickly to establish her trauma treatment area, directing the setup of medical equipment with the same calm authority she had displayed during the earthquake. The 2 professional medics assigned to her team were initially skeptical about taking direction from a teenager, but they quickly recognized her competence as she began organizing the treatment protocols. "I need a primary survey station here, secondary triage area there, and critical care section near the helicopter landing zone," Sarah directed, pointing to specific locations. "We'll need 4 capability, airway management equipment, and trauma surgery prep available for the most critical cases." Medic Thompson, a veteran emergency responder with 15 years of experience, watched Sarah work and turned to his partner. "This kid knows what she's doing," he said with growing respect. "Her setup is textbook perfect." The first casualties began arriving at Sarah's trauma station as other responders extracted them from the simulated collapse. Each actor portrayed specific injuries based on detailed medical scenarios, and Sarah had to make rapid assessment and treatment decisions while coordinating care with her team. "Critical patient incoming," called out one of the rescuers. "Possible internal bleeding, decreased level of consciousness, vitals unstable." Sarah immediately began her primary assessment, checking airway, breathing, and circulation while issuing rapid instructions to her team members. Her movements were precise and confident, and she demonstrated advanced medical knowledge as she evaluated the simulated patient. "Start 2 large bore IVs, type and cross for 6 units, prep for emergency surgery," she ordered. Patients showing signs of hemorrhagic shock, possible splenic rupture based on mechanism of injury and presentation. From the bleachers, students were watching with growing amazement as they began to recognize Sarah among the emergency responders. She was clearly in a leadership role, directing medical care with authority that seemed impossible for someone their age. "Is that Sarah down there?" Tyler asked, squinting toward the trauma station. "I think it is," Marcus replied. "But she's acting like she's in charge of the whole medical team." "She is in charge," said Amy Chen, who had borrowed binoculars from her father. "I can see her directing 2 adult medics, and they're following her instructions." The scenario continued to escalate in complexity. Multiple casualties with different injury patterns required Sarah to make sophisticated triage decisions, determining which patients needed immediate surgical intervention and which could wait for treatment. She coordinated with the helicopter medical crew for patient transport and communicated with the trauma surgery team about incoming casualties. "Martinez, we have a pediatric patient with airway compromise," called out Medic Thompson. "Need your assessment." Sarah immediately moved to the child actor, who was portraying a realistic case of traumatic airway obstruction. She performed a rapid evaluation and determined that emergency surgical airway intervention was indicated. "This patient needs a surgical cric," she announced, referring to an emergency cricothyrotomy procedure. "I'll need a surgical airway kit and prep for immediate transport to trauma surgery." The professional medics working with her exchanged glances of amazement. Cricothyrotomy was an advanced procedure that many emergency responders never performed in their entire careers, but Sarah was calling for it with confidence and medical justification. "Are you certified to perform that procedure?" asked Medic Thompson. "Yes, I am," Sarah replied without hesitation. Tactical emergency casualty care certification includes surgical airway management. She proceeded to demonstrate the procedure on the training mannequin with such skill and precision that the observing physicians nodded in approval. Her technique was flawless, and her explanation of the medical indications was accurate and thorough. From the bleachers, Sarah's classmates were watching in complete shock. The quiet girl who had been mocked for wearing military clothing was performing advanced medical procedures that most adults couldn't handle. "I don't understand," said Ashley Rodriguez. "How does she know how to do that?" "She's been training for years," replied Marcus, who was beginning to piece together everything he had learned about Sarah since the earthquake. "While we were worried about high school stuff, she was becoming a professional emergency responder." The demonstration reached its climax when the helicopter medical evacuation portion began. A Black Hawk helicopter appeared on the horizon, approaching the school's football field for a medical evacuation exercise. The aircraft's arrival created dramatic visual impact, but it also represented the culmination of the complex medical scenarios Sarah had been managing. "Incoming helicopter in 2 minutes," announced the flight medic over the radio. "Critical patient for immediate transport to trauma center." Sarah coordinated the preparation of her most critical patient for air transport, ensuring that all medical interventions were properly secured and that vital signs remained stable. She provided a comprehensive medical briefing to the flight crew, summarizing her assessment, treatments provided, and recommendations for continued care. "Patient is an 18-year-old male with blunt abdominal trauma, hemodynamically unstable despite fluid resuscitation," she reported to the flight medic with professional precision. "Surgical airway established, 2 large bore IVs running, typed and crossed for blood products. Strong suspicion of splenic laceration requiring immediate surgical intervention." The flight medic, a seasoned military medical professional, listened to Sarah's report with obvious respect. "Outstanding assessment and management," he told her. "Your documentation is perfect, and your clinical reasoning is spot on." As the helicopter lifted off with the simulated patient, the demonstration concluded with a debrief session where each team leader explained their decision-making processes to the observers. Sarah found herself standing in front of hundreds of community members, including her entire school, explaining advanced trauma care protocols and emergency medical decision-making. "The key to effective trauma response is systematic assessment and prioritization," she explained to the audience. "You have to quickly identify life-threatening injuries and intervene appropriately while managing multiple patients and coordinating with other responders." Principal Morrison approached the microphone with a look of amazement. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you've just witnessed is remarkable. The team leader for our trauma station, demonstrating those advanced medical procedures and coordinating that complex emergency response, is our own Lincoln High School senior, Sarah Martinez." The silence that followed was profound. Students, teachers, parents, and community members stared at Sarah with expressions of complete shock. The girl many of them thought they knew had just demonstrated capabilities that exceeded those of most professional emergency responders. Then, Tyler Hansen stood up in the bleachers and began applauding. Within seconds, the entire audience was giving Sarah a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Students were crying, teachers were shaking their heads in amazement, and parents were talking excitedly about what they had witnessed. "I can't believe she's our classmate," Jessica said through tears. "She just performed emergency surgery and coordinated a helicopter evacuation like it was routine. She's been capable of this the whole time," Marcus realized. "Every day we made fun of her, she was going home to train for situations like this." As the crowd began to disperse, Sarah was surrounded by people wanting to congratulate her and learn more about her training. military recruiters approached her with scholarship offers, medical schools representatives expressed interest in her continued education, and emergency services departments offered immediate employment opportunities. But the moment that meant the most came when her classmates approached her with genuine respect and admiration, finally understanding that the person they had dismissed and mocked was someone truly extraordinary. The demonstration had revealed Sarah's capabilities to the entire community, but it had also marked a turning point in her life. After years of hiding her abilities to avoid social complications, she could finally be herself completely, knowing that her true character had been revealed for all to see. The weekend following the emergency response demonstration was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. Her phone buzzed constantly with calls from news reporters, military recruiters, and medical program representatives. The video footage of her performing advanced trauma care and coordinating the helicopter evacuation had gone viral on social media, earning national attention for the teenage emergency responder from Lincoln High School. "Sarah, honey, there's another reporter at the door," Elena called from the front room of their small apartment. "This one says she's from CNN." Sarah sighed and looked up from her homework. She had been trying to maintain her normal routine despite the overwhelming attention, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. "Tell her I'll give interviews after graduation," Sarah replied. "Right now I just want to finish school." Elena smiled at her granddaughter's priorities. Even with national media attention and prestigious opportunities being offered, Sarah remained focused on completing her education and honoring her commitments. Monday morning at school brought a surreal experience for Sarah. As she walked through the hallways that had once echoed with mockery and whispered insults, students now stepped aside respectfully and greeted her with genuine admiration. Teachers nodded with newfound respect, and even senior faculty members who had barely acknowledged her existence were now stopping to congratulate her achievements. "Sarah," called out Jessica Webb, hurrying to catch up with her near the lockers. "I've been trying to reach you all weekend. I wanted to apologize properly for how I treated you." Sarah paused and turned to face Jessica, seeing genuine remorse in her expression. "You don't need to apologize, Jessica. What's done is done." "Yes, I do," Jessica insisted. "I was cruel to you for no reason except that I didn't understand you. I made assumptions based on your appearance and never bothered to learn who you really were. That was wrong, and I'm truly sorry." Similar conversations occurred throughout the day. Tyler Hansen approached her before first period with his entire football team behind him. "Sarah, we've been talking, and we want you to know how sorry we are," Tyler began. "We treated you terribly, and you had every right to hate us. But during the earthquake and again on Friday, you helped people who had been mean to you. That shows character that we don't have." "I never hated any of you," Sarah replied honestly. "I just didn't understand why my appearance bothered you so much." "It wasn't really about your clothes," admitted Jake Morrison, one of Tyler's teammates. "I think we were intimidated by something we couldn't identify. You carried yourself differently than other students, and instead of trying to understand why, we made fun of it." Sarah appreciated their honesty, but she was more interested in moving forward than dwelling on past conflicts. "Let's just focus on finishing the school year positively," she suggested. During lunch period, Sarah found herself sitting with Marcus, Jessica, Tyler, and several other classmates who had previously ignored or mocked her. The conversation was awkward at first, as everyone struggled to navigate this new dynamic. "So what's it like?" asked Amy Chen. "Having all this national attention and job offers?" "Overwhelming," Sarah admitted. "I've been training for 3 years to develop these skills, but I never expected this level of public attention." "What are your plans after graduation?" Marcus asked. Sarah looked around the table at faces that were now genuinely interested in her response. "I've been accepted into an accelerated military medical program. I'll complete basic training, then move directly into advanced trauma care specialization. If everything goes well, I could be a certified combat medic within 18 months. "That sounds incredible," said Jessica. "And kind of scary." "The medical part doesn't scare me," Sarah replied. "I love emergency medicine and trauma care. The challenging part will be leaving everything familiar behind and starting over in a completely military environment." Tyler leaned forward with curiosity. "Do you think you'll miss civilian life?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "I don't think I've ever really had a normal civilian teenage experience," she said. My weekends have been spent training with military personnel and emergency responders for years. In some ways, military life might feel more natural to me than high school has. Her response sparked discussions about different life paths and career choices. For the first time, Sarah's classmates were hearing her speak openly about her goals and experiences, and they were amazed by the depth of her commitment and preparation. After school, Sarah attended her regular training session at the fire department, but this time she was accompanied by several classmates who had asked to observe. Chief Williams was happy to accommodate their interest, especially after the publicity from Friday's demonstration. Sarah's been one of our most dedicated volunteers for over a year, Chief Williams told the visiting students. Her skills and reliability have been exceptional. Sarah demonstrated some basic emergency medical techniques for her classmates, explaining the reasoning behind different protocols and procedures. Her teaching style was patient and clear, and her classmates were impressed by her ability to make complex medical concepts understandable. I had no idea this stuff was so complicated, remarked Ashley Rodriguez as Sarah explained the physiological basis for trauma treatment priorities. You're like a walking medical textbook. It takes practice, Sarah said modestly. But, once you understand the underlying principles, the procedures make sense. The following week brought a special assembly where Principal Morrison announced that Sarah had been selected as Lincoln High School Student of the Year, an honor typically reserved for students with perfect grades and extensive extracurricular activities. Sarah Martinez represents the highest ideals of education and personal development, Principal Morrison told the assembled students. While maintaining excellent academic performance, she has pursued advanced professional training that has prepared her to serve others in the most challenging circumstances. As Sarah walked across the stage to accept the award, she received a standing ovation from the entire student body. Students who had once mocked her military-style appearance were now applauding her achievements with genuine enthusiasm. I want to thank everyone who has supported my training over the past 3 years, Sarah said into the microphone. My grandmother, my teachers, the emergency services personnel who welcomed me into their programs, and my classmates who have shown me such kindness recently. She paused and looked around the auditorium at hundreds of faces that were now regarding her with respect and admiration. I also want to say something about being different, she continued. For most of high school, I felt like an outsider because my interests and goals were different from those of my classmates. But I've learned that our differences can be our greatest strengths if we have the courage to pursue what we believe in, even when others don't understand. Her words resonated throughout the auditorium. Many students realized they had learned something important about judging others based on superficial observations. 2 weeks before graduation, Sarah received news that would complete her transformation from social outcast to community hero. She had been awarded a full scholarship to attend a prestigious military medical academy, with guaranteed placement in advanced trauma care specialization programs. This is a remarkable opportunity, Sarah, said Colonel Patricia Hayes, the academy recruiter who delivered the news personally. Your demonstrated skills and leadership potential have impressed everyone who has reviewed your file. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the opportunity. The scholarship would provide world-class medical education and training, preparing her for a career serving in the most challenging emergency medical situations. Graduation day arrived with unusual excitement surrounding Sarah's participation in the ceremony. Local news crews were present to document her achievement, and several military officials attended to honor her accomplishments. As valedictorian Jessica Webb delivered her graduation speech, she made special mention of lessons learned from a classmate who had demonstrated the importance of looking beyond superficial appearances. This year has taught us that we often fail to recognize the extraordinary people around us, Jessica said, looking directly at Sarah. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is also the most capable, the most prepared, and the most dedicated to serving others. When Sarah's name was called to receive her diploma, the applause was thunderous. Students, teachers, parents, and community members gave her a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. She had become a symbol of perseverance, dedication, and the power of pursuing one's convictions despite social pressure. After the ceremony, Sarah was surrounded by well-wishers and media representatives, but the moment that meant the most came when her former classmates approached her with genuine friendship and respect. I'm going to miss you, Jessica said with tears in her eyes. I wish we had been friends earlier. You could have taught us so much. We're friends now, Sarah replied warmly. That's what matters. Tyler Hansen stepped forward with uncharacteristic emotion. Sarah, I want you to know that you've changed how I think about everything. You've shown us what real character looks like, and I'm going to try to be better because of your example. Markuschan spoke for the entire group when he said, "You're going to be an incredible military medic. The people you serve will be lucky to have someone with your skills and dedication taking care of them." As the evening wound down and families began heading home, Sarah stood on the steps of Lincoln High School with her grandmother Elena, looking back at the building where she had spent 4 challenging but ultimately transformative years. "Are you proud of yourself, Mija?" Elena asked, placing a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. "I'm proud that I stayed true to who I wanted to become," Sarah replied thoughtfully. "Even when it was difficult, even when people didn't understand. That's the most important thing," Elena said with satisfaction. "You never compromised your values or your goals for social acceptance. That strength will serve you well in the military." Sarah nodded, thinking about the journey ahead. In a few weeks, she would begin the next chapter of her life, training alongside other dedicated individuals who shared her commitment to serving others in emergency situations. She would finally be in an environment where her dedication and capabilities would be valued from the beginning. But she would always remember Lincoln High School as the place where she learned that staying true to oneself, even in the face of misunderstanding and mockery, ultimately leads to respect and recognition. Her classmates had taught her valuable lessons about human nature, prejudice, and the power of demonstrated competence to change hearts and minds. The girl who had walked those hallways in military surplus clothing, enduring whispers and jokes about playing soldier, was now a nationally recognized emergency responder heading to one of the most prestigious military medical academies in the country. She had proven that quiet dedication and professional preparation could overcome any amount of social adversity. As Sarah and Elena walked home through their neighborhood, Sarah reflected on the irony that her greatest challenge had not been mastering complex medical procedures or passing rigorous physical training. Her greatest challenge had been remaining confident in her chosen path while surrounded by people who couldn't see her potential. Now, as she prepared to enter a world where her skills and dedication would be immediately recognized and valued, Sarah felt grateful for the difficult lessons learned at Lincoln High School. She had developed not just professional capabilities, but also the emotional resilience and strength of character that would serve her throughout a career dedicated to saving lives in the most challenging circumstances. The mocking was over. The real work was about to begin.